this country, because there can be no better cleansing of the system. There can be no better emergence of a new paradigm in the country if from this churning that is taking place emerges a society which is wanting to hold its political executive, its bureaucrats, or anybody in a position of authority accountable for the action that he or she takes. It is this public, this citizen, who must pass the message very clearly that any one of you who are in a position of power, you sit in a glass house. You sit in a place where all your actions are for the world to see. Not only your actions for the world to see, but we are going to hold you responsible for the action that you have taken, and you better explain to us why you took the action that you have taken. But believe me, that would certainly be one of the best forms of good governance, when the accountability of those in authority is established, where those in authority are made to feel that all their actions have to be transparent. But believe me, good governance is not for government alone. Good governance is as much a responsibility of a corporate entity, maybe of an NGO, maybe of a citizens group also. The only difference is that good governance becomes more important because of the simple reason that governments collect money from somebody and spend that money on behalf of somebody else. So there is a certain fiduciary responsibility that they perform, and the fact that they collect money, there is an element of compulsion in it. You and I do not have an option not to pay our taxes. We have to pay taxes at the rate which the government has mandated. But we have the right to ask that this money which was collected from us as tax, as revenue, what was it spent for? And did the outcome actually emerge, which was the stated objective of that spending of that money? Maybe it was a scheme, maybe it was any project, whatever it may be. But history speaks of any number of definitions of democracy where accountability, if it has gone awry, governments have failed to deliver. And I think the best thing that is happening to us is that such accountability is being re-established. But there is one more step that we have to cross, which is the conventional wisdom of good governance is what? Let's take the case of government. That conventional wisdom says governments are architectured, designed to ensure that all actions will be conducted with probity, with a ethical foundation, and with morality in the decision-making process. Maybe a large amount of what has come into public domain in the recent past does not hold this conventional wisdom to be accurate anymore. Maybe we have seen issues tumbling into public domain which do not speak highly of those who took decisions as having been decisions taken with a moral or an ethical edifice. That is where I think the conventional wisdom has to be set aside, and we decide, and that's a proposition I place before all of you, that public oversighting of government decision making or government of good governance is essential because it will benefit economic growth, it will ensure inclusive growth, and it will ensure that monies are spent wisely and for the good of the community at large. And it will also ensure the transparency of the decision-making process, which in the recent past has been a fairly large casualty. You will all accept that the most oft repeated statements which emanate from government and other high dignitaries is that if some misdemeanor gets reported, the best way out is what? Some high dignitary will give a statement saying, law will be allowed to take its own course. We've heard this ad nauseum. And what happens? That is exactly what does not happen. Law is not allowed to take its own course. Cases drag, investigations get sidetracked, issues get prolonged, and maybe 15 years, 16 years, 20 years, 24 years later, you get a verdict by which probably the person is no more, the issue is lost focus of, the priority is lost because some other crisis has overtaken us by that time. And hence, we have to ensure in whatever ways that we can that ultimately the public vigil on government or decision makers is so intense that law is actually allowed to take its own course, and there is no meddling around in that law taking its own course, because we need to practice what the forefathers of our constitution makers had said, that we need to practice a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we can't have a government which does not function to this objective. Now, why does the India story attract such huge attention globally? All countries keep watching. 2014 elections in India, believe me, no other event globally has attracted that much attention as the 2014 election, general election in India. Probably because it affects 1/6 of the global population. And probably because what happens, what emerges out of this election is going to matter in the lives and the economies of large number of other countries too. And it will hence have a huge amount of global ramification. And that is why growth, as much as governance, is not a responsibility of government alone. Growth or economic development is as much a responsibility of any corporate as it is of government. The only difference is that gone are the days when government functioned on what was colloquially referred to as a license Raj. Today, government is more a facilitator. Government, if it wants to ensure sustainable development, government has to incubate growth. Government has to nurture growth. And that is why you will see that in a large number of regulators that have been set up by government, Insurance Regulation and Development Authority, it's regulation and development. Pension Fund Regulation and Development Authority, PFRDA, it's regulation and development. It is so that that regulator develops the growth of that particular sector for which it is mandated. Once you have nurtured the growth, then the question of regulation of that growth comes about. So it is as much the responsibility of these companies, because each of these companies draw very heavily on societal resources. And it is necessary that to the extent that they draw upon those resources, they must lend their shoulders to the accretion of societal resources too. Because most of these are resources which are finite. They are not infinite. If you have spectrum, it's a finite resource. If you have coal mines, those are also a finite resource. They're not an infinite resource. So any one of these resources that you are tapping, this is a national resource which is being given to a private operator, a private developer to exploit commercially, exploit its potential commercially, but for sharing with society as much as it is for his own commercial gain too. So in the exploitation of any one of these, we cannot have any model of governance or exploitation go awry, because let me say that you have all heard of expressions such as revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, current account deficit. All these are very normal terms, but it will be very deleterious for the health of this economy if our economic growth is founded on a deficit of ethics or a deficit of morality. And that's where I think if we have to model growth, if we have to model governance, and we have to make it long-term sustainable, the bottom line will have to be an edifice of morality, ethics, probity, transparency, accountability, whatever you call it. You must have heard the name of the Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter, very well known. Schumpeter had said that he propounded the theory that the essence of entrepreneurship lay in the enviable ability of its managers. No doubt, innovation requires entrepreneurs with new ideas, but not at the cost of ethics. You can have models of governance, you can have models of development, you can have models of corporate excellence, which could at any point of time border on what I would call illegal. But at no point of time can we ever take the risk of doing something which is other than moral, which is in fact immoral. Illegal, maybe some point of time you can be pardoned, but once you do an immoral deed, there is just no way in which you can compensate for that. And what has happened? Microeconomic theory talks about maximizing profits. We are all in commercial business. Why? We want to maximize profit. But microeconomic theory or any theory of economics does not talk about seeking supernormal profits or seeking rent. And that is exactly what seems to have tumbled out into public domain. Large number of corporates in the business of trying to seek rent, where ethical standards have been diluted, where there has been collusion, and to that extent the moral fabric of any business entity gets affected if this continues on a long-term basis. Now, it will be very misplaced corporate governance if corporate managers, some of you are going to be CEOs very soon, start believing that, okay, in the interest of competition, in the interest of doing it once, let me cut the corner, let me take a shortcut, I won't do it again. But at that time, expediency or business competition dictates upon you to quickly get over competition, beat your competitor and get ahead by cutting corners. But believe me, there are any number of examples in the world. You have Lehman Brothers, you have Bear Stearns, you have London Whale, you have Barings Banks or whatever they were called, where the shortcut was taken once, it had to be taken a second time to cover the first time, it had to be taken the third time to cover the second time, and each time that the action was being taken, it was a larger commitment of resources that was being made. And ultimately the cookie came crumbling down, and that's what I would say would not be a model for long-term sustainable development. Now, that's why we have to induce a culture of corporate or government accountability into society, where each one of us feels that whatever action that we are taking, we are going to be held accountable for that action that we take. Because this nation has somewhere down the line lost its interest, lost its intensity, lost its encouragement in wanting to pursue excellence. Let me give you a classic example. The 2012 Olympic Games. We are fond of comparing ourselves with China. We say we will grow into an economic superpower that like China is. We came back from the Olympic Games in 2012 with our athletes, and believe me, what I'm going to say does not reflect upon the capability of those athletes. They certainly did us proud in whatever events that they had participated in. But those athletes, when they came back, they landed in Delhi, they were all put into flower bedecked trucks, paraded over the streets of Delhi. Chief ministers falling over each other, somebody saying 1 acre of land, I'll give him free, somebody saying 25 lakhs, I will be giving him free. And what was our medal tally? 0 gold, 2 silver, 4 bronze medals. That's all. And what was China? 28 gold, 32 silver, and whatever, 88 minus whatever this is, 28 bronze medals, 88 in all. They were second only to the US. US had got 104. And we compare ourselves with China. What is our problem? Have we become a nation which is content with being mediocres? Have we begun to celebrate mediocrity? Has mediocrity got into our DNA, into our blood, that we are willing to rest content with bronze and silver medals, and not when the whole world is aspiring for gold, we say, okay, bronze and silver is good enough for us. Now, that is the pursuit of excellence that somewhere down the line we seem to have lost. Whether it is in the field of academics, whether it's in the field of science and technology, whether it's in the field